get started in just a few minutes here. Thank you all for coming. Barry, good to have you here again. And who else we have? Grammy, thanks for coming. Good to see you, as always. Sweet. Super exciting meetup tonight, and I'm so happy to have you all join. This is New York Augmented Reality. Currently, we're meeting on Zoom, but we're in New York. And today's April 19th, 2021. We just crossed the 500 member threshold, so we're super excited. And thank you, everyone, for being part of this tremendous journey. It's been so good to have you here. So tonight's agenda, and pardon this bad animation, but it could be cool. I'm going to start off with some of the latest and greatest news. Then we'll go into Dominic Kofacker. He'll introduce some interesting AR/UX projects and talk about realitygroup.org, which is a fascinating project. Then we'll go into presentations. We'll hear from Matthew Lorraine. Welcome to Post Reality. Steve Robbins. Learn a little bit more about liquid crystal technology and AR. And then we'll hear from Eric Johnson of the infamous Mojo Vision and their smart contact lens. So we look forward to that. And thanks guys for being here. So
thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So the first, latest and greatest is the Tyco direct-to-consumer furniture company from Warsaw, Poland. They just led a Series C round. So their app allows you to customize furniture and visualize it based on the dimensions of your space. And the sales have risen 132% during the pandemic. So like ordering a pre-built sofa on IKEA is one thing, but actually getting to customize it and visualizing your space is super cool. So I'm excited to share the Tyco app. So as you can see in this video over here, I, the user, am customizing the width to make it fit the exact dimensions of the room. And then I can go ahead and order it from the app. So really nice use case of AR and practical as well. Then still on the furniture topic, we have IKEA Studio, which I haven't yet had the opportunity to test out myself. It's in beta version on Test Flight, so you can sign up for the Test Flight link as well. I will post the link as soon as I'm finished with this part of the presentation. But it basically is a step up from IKEA Place, the old IKEA AR app, and allows you to capture 3D room plans. And then with the scan, you can place shelving system, decorations, change wall colors, a lot of really nice things. And the UX is really beautiful, as you can see here, and it informs to like a future potential version of the app that lives on a headset versus a iPad or iPhone. So this is IKEA Studio. You can check it out. Google Maps, indoor navigation with live view, really cool. And it's awesome to have Matthew here and Eric both work, or Matthew works at Google, Eric has worked at Google in the past, and live views has been a really cool feature to test out, especially in New York City. The outdoor live view has been really nice. And now we have indoor live view for complex interior spaces. So like airports and malls, you can use AR as a visual guide to help you understand your orientation. And I'm sure Matthew could speak about this way better than I can, but it uses global localization, as Google coins it, which uses the AI to scan billions of street view images to understand the orientation of the user. So that's really exciting. It should be rolling out in the next few months at a mall near you, hopefully, because I'm really excited to use it. So check it out, Google Maps indoor navigation. Next, we have app clips. So if you can just take a minute to scan this app clip code, if you'd like, with your phone. It's super cool. So app clips are sick, and you don't see enough of them. So they're basically under 10 megabyte micro experiences that can be location anchored, which is extremely powerful for augmented reality because you don't need a full app. They can be directly tied to the location of scanning. It's really exciting. So developers for sure start looking into this. Here's an example of the app clip that you just scanned. It's called The New Nature. And you scan the code and boom, it just pops up the app clip. Very lightweight. It takes a bit, you need internet connection obviously, and it takes a bit of time to download the experiences. But right after you launch it, you can place this you can place the AR experience in your space. This one specifically can be placed anywhere, but they could be developed to be more location specific. But this is really, really exciting. So this was all triggered through an app clip. I didn't have to download anything, just to scan. Incredible. I don't know if this could be coded in Unity or not. You might need to, I'm sure there's some type of fusing you could do here, but definitely worth looking into. All right. Next, we have Apple event tomorrow at 10 a.m. The Mark Gurman, one of the notorious Apple leakers, does not anticipate this to be a headset release because he thinks a headset release should happen in person with press there and just a larger event with in-person presence, because since it's their most significant hardware launch since 2015, they want to probably make it more of a big deal than an online event. However, if you go to appleevents.com and tap on the Apple logo, you will find a little AR experience built in, potentially indicating some new AR news. And I also particularly like this add to calendar button on the bottom, which is just nice UI in the screen space that helps launch some additional activities from the AR experience. So that's the Apple event. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. PST, which is 1 p.m. EST, so definitely try to tune in. And now, speaking of cutting edge UX and AR, I've always been a big fan of Dominic Hofacker's work, and he's been in a meetup in the past, and I'm excited to have him again. He is an experienced designer and prototype. He's previously worked at Facebook Reality Labs. His work, macOS Reality, was featured on a ton of Apple News websites, including Cult of Mac. And he's here today to share a bit more about his projects and also discuss realitygroup.org, and a platform to connect individuals that are all passionate about the space. So Dominic, please share your screen, and it's great to have you here.
All right, thanks for that really cool introduction. Yeah, as Enya said, second time being here, so it's always a pleasure. Let me share my screen real quick, and let's dive right into what I'm showing today. So really quickly, for those who don't know me, as Enya said, I'm an experienced designer with the focus in AR and VR. And I do share a lot of explorations in wide-ranging fields on social media, and specifically Twitter or LinkedIn. And some of them have gotten some traction. But let me show you some examples here. So one example, for example, that's something that kind of it comes close to what we were just talking about with Google Indoor Navigation. So this is a prototype that is for like AR wayfinding and AR navigation that is running on iPhone here in ARKit, which is one example of pretty much a flagship use case of AR. Then there are also, different explorations. So this one was specifically for input exploration in the VR field, and for specifically in this case for hand tracking enabled wearable devices. Could be virtual reality or augmented reality for navigating a map, and then also more for like the productivity space. In this case, how specific ecosystems such as Mac, the Mac ecosystem can work together with an augmented reality to work together to like enhance productivity. Naturally, with sharing a lot of work in public, you get a lot of people asking yourself how they can get started in the XR field. And there are also a lot of people that are watching right now. They're watching because they're interested getting closer to the XR field and getting started in AR VR. So based on that, I founded Reality Group, which is a community space that is aiming to connect the world's XR community. And it's currently in beta stage, and you can visit the following link to get a sneak peek, and you can subscribe to the newsletter to get notified once it's out of beta stage. But naturally, to give you more context here, what you're basically trying to do is to create a home for aspiring talent, and meaning for people who are really completely new to the field, and then also for professionals who established professionals to provide a platform that amplifies, as an amplifying tool. And you might be wondering, well, there's a lot of out there already, like AR/VR Association, XR Bootcamp, all that kind of stuff. However, most of these are for profit, and Reality Group is intended to be a non-profit organization, so it's completely free for people, a way to get started in that field. And more specifically, really quickly, how that platform provides value is, first of all, a curated list of events in the AR/VR space, such as the one that you're all attending right now, among many others that are really worth visiting. And then we have a community section of people, and these are all people who have given explicit consent to be part of the community. These are all notable figures, because if you just start out in the field, you don't know, who's a notable figure who creates inspiring content that I'm interested in. So that's what the community section is for. And if in the future, on the future roadmap, these are people who could also be part of custom events there as well. And then resources to get people started. It's always hard for people to have a list of resources of interesting content that can really help them to get started in the AR/VR field. And then lastly, also, for those who want to get hired, a curated list of jobs in the AR/VR space. And that was basically it already. Once again, if you're interested, you can just visit the link then to get started there and get notified once it's out of beta. If you have questions for myself, feel free to ping me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm always happy to get back to you.
Thank you, Dominic. True inspiration to us all. Love all your work, and it looks like what you're working on speaks nicely to the mission of New York Augmented Reality. So appreciate you coming on, and hopefully get the chance to hang on a little longer. Sweet. Next up, we have a very exciting speaker for you. Let me share my screen. Still figuring out this flow here. It was my intention to make the slide cooler, but nevertheless, without further ado, I'm excited to have Matthew Lorraine here with us tonight. He's the head of creative for AR partnerships at Google. And for the past 15 years, he's been redefining the connection between brands and users through the relationship of both physical and digital realities. Most recently at Google, Matthew partnered with Disney and Lucasfilm to create the acclaimed Mandalorian AR experience, which can be viewed on 5G-enabled Android devices, so definitely check it out. Matthew's also the co-founder of Fake Artists, a collective leveraging machine learning and augmented reality to explore the concept of a post-reality, which is the real, in my words, or in my summary, the real world as a canvas for creativity, which you'll learn a bit more about. Matthew has also earned multiple awards for his work from global organizations, and just to name a few, Cannes, Lions, the Clios, and FWA. Additionally, Matthew is an organizer of From the Futures, an experimental series of gatherings designed to virtually connect in a time of physical distancing. Matthew is redefining augmented reality, and it's amazing to have him here tonight. So Matthew, please take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you for super nice intro, Andy, and hi, everybody. Can you see my screen properly? I'm guessing yes. Okay.
Yep, all good.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, so let's go then. I think you already made an intro, so I pass very quickly. Indeed, I'm working at Google, where my job is to develop creative territories and concepts using immersive technologies, AR and 3D. For our top partners, I'm really focused on media entertainment. I work a lot with game studios, movie studios, sports leagues. And then on the side, indeed, I have a creative collective called Fake Artists, where we're doing a lot of more experimental work across augmented reality, machine learning, and so forth. You can check out my work on my own website if you're interested at mathieulerin.com. Today I'm going to talk about pretty much share some of my work, but try also to share some of the themes I've been really looking at for the last few months. And a lot of the work I've been doing recently is really at the crossroad of two themes. One theme is what I call post-reality. It's really becoming more and more kind of like an obsession in my practice, and I will explain in a second what it is. And the other theme that is becoming increasingly important for me those days is how to create next generation experiences with 5G. Post-reality is really something more catering to my own personal kind of creative research with fake artists. On the other side, with my day-to-day jobs at Google, 5G is becoming increasingly a huge topic. As you probably saw, a lot of carriers, a lot of telecom are trying to market 5G, and they are often coming to us asking how we can help them creating expenses for that new network. So first, post-reality. What do I mean by post-reality? Well, my hypothesis is that the radical transformation of our perceived reality is going to be one of the most significant cultural factors for our lifetime. We're already seeing it. There's a reason why you're all here today. You probably believe in it. It's happening everywhere, not just with AR. It's happening with politics. It's happening with culture. And it's going to accelerate. And I think this is, as an artist, a tremendous opportunity to kind of question our relationship to our world and to our lives. It's also a tremendous challenge because I think it's going to open the door to a lot of potentially dangerous or scary things. And that is one of the field of exploration I'm the most interested in these days. How do we question reality and how do we look at that phenomenon? We see a lot of examples. I'm sure you recognize a lot of them, from metahumans to generated image by OpenAI, deepfake, virtual fashion, and virtual events. On the other side, in my day-to-day, I'm not just thinking about post-reality, right? I'm thinking, how can I deliver experiences for Google partners? And a lot of my focus is really on how do we help those days really showcase what's possible with 5G. And we have a lot of partners coming to us, really wondering, how do we do that, right? Sure, we can do an AR experience. We can throw a lot of money at a volumetric experience, but people don't necessarily understand the value of it. And so a lot of the thinking we are developing those days is how do we create next generation experiences in order to help promote next generation networks? And that's really the approach we're taking. We believe that it's not enough to talk just about download speed. It's not enough just to talk about faster experiences or faster connections. If you want to promote 5G, you need to literally create next-gen experiences with a real qualitative leap. And so I'm sharing with you very quickly, but that's the framework we're using when we are creating next-gen AR experiences those days. To promote 5G is really how do we make sure those experiences feel fast, of course, with higher quality assets done only very quickly, but also how do we make sure those experiences feel smart, trying to use machine learning, game design, and other different methods and technologies to pretty much supercharge those experiences. Of course, we're trying to create experiences that feel also immersive because of AR and 3D, but also immersive because they might be connected to different devices with that whole idea of ambient computing. And finally, how do we make those experiences feel personal? And we are looking a lot at what we call contextual design and how do we use as many signals as possible to personalize the experience to a user and to make sure that given a different context, given a different interaction, they may have totally different experiences. So those are like the two kind of frame of reference we use when we approach the work. And now, very quickly, I'm just going to share more example of that work. Some of it use that framework, some of it is actually anterior to it. But again, I wanted to start with like, this is how we're approaching, this is how I'm approaching a lot of my work those days. Now, if I look at different creative territories that I've been exploring over the years with augmented reality, the first one is probably the most obvious one, but it's really how with augmented reality, you can step into iconic stories. That's a territory you could also apply in some aspect to VR, right? But that idea of like taking existing also iconic stories and bringing them to life in your environment is something I'm very excited about. And that's something we did very recently with indeed Lucasfilm for The Mandalorian. It was very interesting because Disney and Lucasfilm have a lot of very I would not say weird, but I would say strict creative rules. They have a really strong point of view on what should be possible and not. And one of their rules was like they don't want their characters to be mixed with the real world, which is by itself quite a challenge if you're trying to create an AR experience. And the way we solved it is by pretty much trying to not just bring a character in your world, but bring a full scene. You know, with the environment, with the weather, that's what you see here. So it's snowy, the snow is taking over the space. We actually had occlusion thanks to the depth API. And what we did is we literally created at a 1:1 scale an exact scene from the show. That was really the mandate here. Working directly with the showrunners and the creative directors, we wanted to give you the feeling that you could step into an episode from The Mandalorian from the season 1. So that's what you see here. And you can see here a few other examples. You see 3 different scenes on the right side. That was a 5G experience, so we tried to use those next-gen framework. And so, for example, we made the experience a bit more contextual by using different signals, such as time of the day. So if you try the experience by night or by day, we would deliver different assets. Of course, also we use the depth API, and we had occlusion that allowed us to have scene, as you can see on the left, that would kind of better fit with your environment instead of just slapping graphics on top of your environment. That idea of like taking iconic stories and turning them into an AR experience is something we played with previously. So this was a previous project I worked on at Google 2 years ago, where in that case, we took iconic ad campaigns and tried to turn those iconic ad campaigns into AR experiences. That was an ad campaign that got pretty good success a few years ago for the Shoe Shine Kiwi. Who would have thought that I would work on Shoe Shine AR experiences, right? And they had a really cool campaign called Portrait Completed, where they took famous self-portraits, as you can see on the top, and they tried to imagine what would be the shoes, you know, the kind of like lower part of the human body version of that campaign. And what you can see on the right side is our mandate was to take those campaigns and then bring them to life in your space with augmented reality. So we picked Van Gogh. We had a lot of fun recreating that kind of like Van Gogh characters in the style of Van Gogh, and fans and users were able to really bring that to life in their space at a 1:1 scale also. One is this idea that with AR, you can turn the world into your canvas. It's been for me one of the things that fascinated me all those years. Like suddenly your environment is a playground and you can transform all the things you have around you and give them a new meaning or change, you know, the way you perceive them or just play with it. So to kind of illustrate that territory, first I'm going to play a video of a project I worked on last fall. That was for the launch of a Cloud Anchors, new version of Cloud Anchors that allow for persistent experiences on AR Core. So the ability to replace experiences around in the city for fans to find. And so the goal of that project was, I was asked by our teams to create a vision video that would kind of show the potential of what that API could do. I'm here. I'm reading that there's no sound. It's best with the sound. There's a nice soundtrack, but I think you get the point though. And showing 2 use cases of like, if you can turn the world into a playground, you know, for our expenses, you can start to play with a lot of dimension, right? And one dimension is time, you know, like time travel. That was the first use case, be able to change a whole neighborhood. In that case, that's literally my neighborhood. I live in Tribeca, and imagining how Tribeca was in the late 19th century when it was more of an industrial neighborhood is something quite exciting. Again, we've seen some of those use cases in the past. What if I could use AR to bring history to life? And the other one is also a well-known use case, which is what if I could turn my environment into a video game? But those are things that are becoming increasingly possible thanks to persistence. And years ago, we had a lot of cool ideas around it, but it was very hard to execute. Those days, it becomes much easier to execute those. And you talked about Google AR map and navigation. There's a direct connection to it because that video was to showcase the fact that not only you can create those persistent experiences, but also you can help guide the users through those experiences using navigation. Another example of using the world as a canvas is really how you can play with, for example, the sky. This is not a Google project. This is a fake artist project that is not an AR project per se. It's more using machine learning. But we came with that idea during the first lockdown back in April 2020, where if you're in New York City, even if you're anywhere else, probably in the US, you probably felt those few months where we were just staying home, barely going outside, obviously a highly stressful moment. And I remember really missing being outside and looking at the sky. I would just look at it from my window. And that's kind of how we came with that idea of what we call the Magic Sky camera. So the Magic Sky camera is pretty much using sky segmentation to allow you to take any picture and replace your sky by any GIF from the platform Giphy. So it's really this idea that you can remix your picture and remix the sky in your picture with millions of potential GIF already available on the platform. So very simple but fun experiments. We were very excited by the reception we got on it. It was a product hunt of the day in first position at the time, which was a nice recognition. And very simple, but good example of like what you can do once you turn your environment into a playground. Adobe has been doing a lot of work around that, also sky segmentation, and you even have that now as a default tool in Adobe Photoshop. A third territory that is also exciting is really this idea of right-clicking the world. We have a product at Google called Google Lens, which is visual search. And I think visual search is a great example of what does it mean to be able to point at something in the physical world and interact with it the same way you're able to interact with an image online. That idea that we are going to be able to do in the physical environment, all the things we can already do on a screen, copy and paste, click and save, compare, all of those different interactions, I think is very inspiring for me. And so I had the opportunity in the early days of Google Lens to work on a lot of the creative development for it and a lot of the third-party activation. So here's an example of what we did with Netflix for the launch of season 3 of Stranger Things, where we played with advertising in the New York Times, and we were asked to find a way to promote and tease the show. And what we did is we created fake 80s ads that really literally look like ads from the 80s for the different location from the show. So you had like the mall, the Starcourt Mall, and you had the photography studio, and you had the grocery store. And upon looking at those ads with Google Lens, they would come to life, using image tracking, obviously. And there was a little bit of a scavenger hunt situation where if you could collect the 3 different ads in the paper, you would unlock an exclusive video. So turning physical ads into kind of interactive experiences was one of the things we did. Here's another example of another project I worked on, this time in a book. We worked with Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton is famous for their bags and their fashion, but they also do actually a lot of interesting work in the field of publishing. And they have art travel books, I would say, where they hire illustrators and famous artists to talk about and to design about different locations. And so we worked with Louis Vuitton to bring to life the Korea edition, where, as you could see, every single page of the books was coming to life with nice animations and sound. And then you were able to dive deeper into the story of each page and learn more about the Korean culture. My final territory for today is around, again, post-reality, that ability to fake everything and to mess with authenticity of objects is a very interesting topic for me. So one example of a project I worked on recently that is a fake artist project is a project called Fake Food, where I actually train a stallion model to generate fake fast food, using a few hundreds of existing burgers or in the case ice creams, and then be able to generate as many as possible. And so what you see here are latent walk videos showing that kind of slow progression of that generated food. I'm quite fascinated by that idea of like AI-based creativity, because I think it's going to be a huge game changer. In that case, I find that one pretty funny. It's borderline between yummy and very gross, which I think is the whole point. That's why I picked fast food, obviously. But beyond that, it has much stronger implication in the future. This is not my project. This is something. It was a research paper published by OpenAI a couple of months ago. They called that Dolly, and they were showing OpenAI is famous mostly for their text generation technologies with GPT-3, but they also started playing with images. And what you see here is a machine learning model that is able to generate illustration on demand based on a prompt. And that's, in my opinion, mind-blowing. They're just the ability to generate thousands, even millions of images just by describing what you want. And that is happening in 2D. We start to see some people doing also work following kind of similar approaches with 3D content. And I think that gives us a little bit of a sense of where also creativity is going in a world where a lot of the work is going to be increasingly automated using that kind of models, which means, raise real question around like, what should you be specialized in? Should you focus more on becoming an illustrator or maybe more a strategist who will use those tools? But clearly a lot of change and a lot of exciting things coming there. Thinking beyond, a few other fields, as a creative director, I'm looking at those days, which is very interesting. One is really combining 3D content with live action. So not necessarily augmented reality in the real space, but more how do we combine any kind of video live action, whether it's a red carpet, it could be a concert, it could be a product launch. How do we combine that with real-time 3D content? This is my favorite example from last year when it comes to virtual show that was produced by Moment Factory for Billie Eilish. It was beautiful, and there's a lot to do in that space. The other theme we're looking at those days that is very fascinating is how can we create a whole new creative pipeline from virtual production to AR experiences. Virtual production, which in that case is using, for example, game engines such as Unreal to help create video content, is a huge game changer, in my opinion. Lucasfilm is using it for Mandalorian, and it's opening a lot of possibilities. But what's exciting is that also means that there's potentially a new pipeline where we may be able to reuse some of those assets from those shows and use them for their immersive experiences in AR. And the third theme we're very looking at is artificial characters. You probably know that the former founder from Magic Leap is now working on that topic. MetaHumans from Unreal is very exciting. And so combining pretty much chatbot technologies with generative hyperreal 3D graphics like that to kind of create characters that could be used for storytelling is also an interesting theme for us, like be able to engage with a character. So that's it for me. Thanks for listening. And yeah, if you are curious to see more of my work, you can check out my portfolio.
Wow. Just wow. I got some messages where I asked a friend, hey, do you have any questions? And the response is, nah, my mind is just blown.
I still take questions.
So seriously, incredible breadth of work and of quality experience too, and in augmented reality, exploring a user interface that has yet to be explored. So it's incredible to see your work and how you're pushing the industry forward. So thank you. I have a question from Barry, who wants to know about haptics and if you think haptic feedback or the lack of haptics at the moment is going to play a role in augmented reality in the future. If you've worked with any projects in that sense in the past, or just any thoughts regarding haptics.
I mean, I think haptics are clearly important, and if you think in terms of post reality and the ability to change or manipulate your reality, haptics is key part of the experience. Like, you need to look at all the senses and see how you can manipulate or recreate those. So clearly important. Today, most of the work we're doing is smartphone AR, just in my case, and so haptics are quite limited. It's like fun vibration, if that makes sense. But obviously, haptics very important with VR experience. I'm a huge Oculus fan, and I think haptics plays a big role. And you probably also saw what the Facebook Reality Labs published. I think it was like 3-4 weeks ago. How they, I don't know if it was exactly haptics, or it was more like wrist control, but it felt like they were definitely looking at that space.
Definitely.
So I mean, long story short, haptics very important, and as we're doing like a next gen ideation, we're looking at it. The big limitation though is that right now, if you want to be able to distribute an experience at scale, you're mostly relying on smartphone AR, and then you have only one tool at your disposal, which is phone vibration. So there's just not a lot we can do for the time being.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew. David Gold wants to know, is Unity the main tool you're using for creating these experiences?
Unity's been the main tool we've been using, yeah, for sure. I would say though that for the last 6 months, in my personal case, there's been a renewed interest for Unreal for a bunch of reasons. One is because Unreal, I was talking about virtual production. Epic is doing incredible work with like big studios like Disney to really kind of create that, use Unreal for virtual production. And so that's why my head is like, well, I'm sure Unity could do the same. They just don't have the partnerships with Disney, but like, how do we create again a new creative pipeline from like virtual production to AR? The other reason why Unreal is interested for me is that there are often cases where you can push a little bit further, in my opinion, Unreal graphics, especially with the next Unreal 5 coming. And as we are starting to look at cloud rendering technologies, where we can now run those projects, on pretty much laptops and not on the phone, there's much more we can do. And so Unreal is very exciting for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew. And then last question, a bit more conceptual from Evan. Will there be a time in the future where you won't be able to tell the difference between reality and digital?
Well, I guess that's a bit the fantasy / vision for all of us. And that's exactly why when I look at post reality, I think that it's going to be an insane change in our lives, because I feel we one day get there. And Eric, who is working on the lenses, is really looking at like one day, hopefully, if we can make the physics work, we'll have always on AR, and the graphics will be cloud rendered and perfect. So possibly, but that opens real question though. What is the equivalent of like phishing? Today you receive, I don't know how many often you receive those fake emails or those fake SMS pretending to be your bank and whatever, you name it, and trying to get your information. So it's always the kind of worst case scenario I have is like, what happens if in like 20 years from now, I have someone who looks like my wife, talks like my wife, and somehow start to ask information? Wow. That's kind of crazy. So possible that one day we won't know the difference between both, but I think then we need to think hard about how do we prevent the bad use cases to happen, and what are the the neutrals we have at our disposals to kind of be able to differentiate.
Yeah. Thank you, Matthew. It was awesome to have you on. Such a pleasure.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, beautiful. So next up we have Steve Robbins here tonight. Steve's an industry veteran, and he's been in AR and VR for over 3 decades. Early on in Steve's career, he designed heads-up displays for fighter jets, including the Eurofighter F-22, and developed over 10 head-mounted displays for AR and VR soldier systems. Steve was also technical director for the JSF F-35 fighter head-mounted display. And more recently, Steve was the first AR optics engineer for Microsoft HoloLens, where he was a senior director of optics. Steve is now working at Imagine Optics, where he is leveraging liquid crystal polymer optics to fuel the next generation of AR wearables. Steve, it's a pleasure to have you here, and looking forward to your presentation.
Right. Thank very much for the invitation, and great to be here. And I guess the audience is really broad tonight, so so I'll try and keep it at a fairly reasonably high level. I am a hardware level engineer by trade, so I will get in the weeds a little bit. But you know, as I said, my background is head-mounted displays, so not just optics, but you know, certainly British Aerospace. I spent 5 years in a human factors team. So so basically, I was head of cockpit for cockpit R&D in my last role there. But super cool technology is captured my attention for, as you said, 30 years. So I've seen a lot of good things and a lot of bad things actually in AR and VR. So I'm going to talk a little bit about liquid crystal technology, and it's a technology and you know, a main reason for joining Imagine Optics is I've come across a lot of technologies in my career, and this one really caught my attention, and I really think that this technology deserves, you know, to have a major impact in AR VR. And I can talk you through the pieces, but major reason for me wanting to join this is I do find this technology fascinating, and it was a big move moving from Microsoft, as you can probably guess. So let me go into describing who we are as a company. So Imagine Optics has been a company for over 17 years now, and that's quite a long time. So it's not exactly a startup. And before about a year and a half now, I guess, they were based at the University of North Carolina. And so Professor Ascuti and a lot of people researching this area of technology developed the technology from where it was to where it is today. But even before moving into the factory, which is that premises on the right-hand side picture, they were developing the manufacturing designs for machinery that could handle this material. So a lot of experience in the materials, a lot of experience in algorithms and software, and so let me kind of describe where we're at with the technology. Now, as I said, I'm an HMD guy, and we really kind of need to talk about the vision for VR AR, and you know, one of the major things I think is the apps, and Matthew gave a great presentation on some of the things that, you know, some of the really exciting things you can do with AR and VR. And unfortunately, the hardware is not there right now, and you can see that from where we're at with some of the products. And but what we're aiming for in terms of the technology is that we believe when both performance and usability are high enough, then VR, AR, display and capture systems, sorry for reading out, but will connect people more genuinely, lead to better storytelling and then entertainment, more effective learning, more productive work, and more sustainable lives. Now, we really mean that. And really, it does need to meet that bar. You know, we're not there yet, but you know, it's not just the displays, it's the capture system. And you know, you can create software, you can create the virtual environments. But some of the great things that we're doing in AR and VR is actually bringing in the real world into that world. And these are the hardware gaps. So and you know, you can see that in just about every AR and VR system out there, the image quality really isn't quite there yet. The form factor, the size and the weight of these systems are way too high. And from a manufacturing cost, we're really too high. I mean, you know, no one's going to pay $3,500 for a HoloLens system unless you're in an industry. So what we'd like to do is to generate AR VR systems, which is well under $1,000, and that's super difficult to achieve. Now, we think that our technology, liquid crystal polymer optics, offers a disruptive component of that, of bringing that to bear, bringing that to where it needs to be. And this presentation kind of covers some of that. And yeah, you know, unobtrusive, effortless. We talked about how much high, you know, resolution is high enough to make it really real. And as I said, it's not just the display side of things, it's also the environment capture and presentation. So unless we're there, we're really not going to bring each other together. And this is what we're after as AR systems. I think the industry as a whole are after true spectacles. And some of the things that we have wrong with our current systems, we have see-through rainbows on diffractive optics, and also forward light leakage. So there's a lot of light that escapes an AR system, and I can talk to you a little bit about that later on. And field of view, we need to be better, and a lot of the systems out there are very non-uniform, so color and luminance, so they're not very bright at the edge of the display, and the colors, they're really not realistic colors. White is really difficult to achieve. And you know, some of the aspects of focus, most head-mounted displays out there right now are stereopsis displays, where it's a fixed focus, and the depth is really generated by stereo vision. So you talk about different versions of objects out there. Objects are given by multiple cues. There are lots of cues for depth, two of which are focus and then stereo. And we're trying to achieve focus depth for what would be great would be focus per pixel, but we're not even there with display yet. Focus accommodation, where the whole display focuses, that's difficult to achieve even now with AR systems. You know, because everyone wants to have mobile applications, getting improved efficiency is really important. And of course, lower cost. Now, we talk about disruptive technology. If you're a techno geek, you know, and you've been around long enough, we've seen multiple disruptive technologies in a lifetime. And optics is kind of having a revolution of optics over just the last 30 years, really. So I would say before my career in optics, which started in 1988, a long time ago, you know, just about every system out there was glass lenses, and you know, there's a real very few examples where you know, they aren't glass lenses. There's this weird thing called dichromated gelatin holograms, and dichromated gelatin is actually the food stuff that we eat every day, unfortunately, with processed food, and we can make gratings out of that. And the holographic tele display that I designed back in 1988-89, the hologram was actually made out of this material. Now, it's crushed cow bones, is literally gelatin, and it's made optically by a lot of processing, and in the end, it's not a bad holographic material. But pretty much before the you know, 1980s, most things were really glass optics. Now we saw a bit of a revolution in diamond turning, so manufacturing technology came into its own, and then we saw a few different types of grating structure, you know, like Aztec structure. And then somewhere in the 90s, polymer diffuse liquid crystal gratings came about. And you know, Aconi has taken really photopolymer Bragg gratings to kind of the limit of that. But we've seen a few more technologies, and a lot of AR systems out there use slanted surface gratings, surface relief gratings, which use a nano imprint lithography process. Now, what's come into its own really is molded plastic optics, and you can see molded plastic optics in just about every application now, from cell phone cameras, our spectacles now are plastics, and they are certainly not going away. And as far as disruption goes, I think molded plastic optics probably represents one of the biggest things in optics out of everything. Now, what we're kind of trying to argue really is that liquid crystal optics are really set to be disruptive in the optics world. And in order to be disruptive, there has to be a few things happening, really. And so let me get to the next slide. Really, the first of all is there needs to be a reason for being. And what I mean by that is that technology needs to do something, and it needs to do something better than the next technology. And so if you think about just about every technology that's been disruptive, you know, there's always a better way of doing things, and sometimes they come along and really the other technologies disappear. You know, vinyl records is one of those where a few people on the planet are still playing vinyl records, but most people transition to other technologies like compact discs. And even now, compact discs are really being disrupted by streaming. And so, so that's a good example of a disruptive technology. Well, that technology needs to be better than the next. The other thing that needs to happen really is there needs to be a few supporting things in order to make that happen. And in our case, it's the materials. So liquid crystal polymers were really introduced, you know, not that long ago, really, from a technology point of view. And really, what we've seen over the last kind of 15 or so years is an improvement in materials for this technology. And then there are people, not just you know, North Carolina University, but there are others out there that have developed the algorithms that can support the design of these components. Now, what we've done as a company, you know, we have all the algorithms that can design just about every component that we support. And, you know, a lot of the modeling takes place in MATLAB. We've also introduced that to ZMax now, so we have custom VLLs for our optics. But what we've been able to do over the last kind of 2 or 3 years now is, after maturing the technology in a lab for, you know, 15 years or so, we've moved that into a manufacturing suite. And what we have now is the ability to make that technology in large formats, and especially our kind of roll-to-roll processes. So where roll-to-roll is right now is, you know, if you look at most technologies that involve a sheet of plastic or whatever, roll-to-roll is by far the cheapest way of manufacturing. And so, so we have in our factory a roll-to-roll, 2 roll-to-roll machines actually, that were designed over the kind of previous 2 years of before moving into the factory. And in the last few months, we've made great strides in improving the quality of the material that comes off now. And we've actually delivered our first quarter wave plate off of a roll, which is an amazing achievement for the team. Okay, so so here we are. I mean, it may not mean something to everybody, but if you know, these are the optics that we produce, which are super flat and super thin. And so this is on a bendy bit of plastic. The coating itself on that piece of plastic is 3 microns. A hair off your head is around about 50 microns, 50 to 75 microns. So this is much thinner than a human hair. And so we have control of those coatings to that degree where we lay down, you know, a few hundred nanometers of coating, so sub-wavelength thicknesses of layers onto these materials. And we can make you know, a number of different components which are at the base of a lot of optics out there. So retarders, which change the type of light that goes through materials like liquid crystal displays, for instance. We can make reflectors, we can make lenses, so these are diffractive lenses. And we can also make these things called Bragg polarization gratings, where the grating spacing is actually sub-wavelength. And so those especially lend itself for AR waveguide displays, which are at the heart of a lot of AR systems out there. So how are these made? This is kind of cool. Now, they start off with a very, very thin, so just a few nanometers of this photo alignment material. Now, the photo alignment material is actually the material that's used in just about every liquid crystal display out there. And they, you know, when you add liquid crystal to those liquid crystal alignment layers, liquid crystal itself is a long molecule, and it aligns itself to that photo alignment layer. And so to enable switching in a liquid crystal display, you have to have that good alignment. And that's what this material does for our liquid crystal polymer. Now, the liquid crystal polymer starts off as a liquid, but what happens is the liquid crystal molecules self-align to that photo alignment layer, and then we cure all that material and hit it with UV, and that freezes those liquid crystal molecule alignment, and they form functional blocks of our coating. So we can form, you know, retarders, we can form diffraction gratings, and they all play a part in optics. So I'm not going to go through this because I think this is kind of too low level for the audience, but you know, we have retarders that are super flat performance given by the blue line. I'll just keep going through. We can make color filters. This shows the alignment of the LC molecules by our direct write process. We can make lenses, and this is kind of fun because with one type of polarized light, it forms a focus, and the orthogonal polarization state, it forms a diverging focus. Now, what can we do with that? Well, Facebook has done this really interesting application for VR. And what they've done is they've got a whole bunch of these polarization lenses and LC switches. And what we can do is, if you look at that little dinosaur picture there, with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a combination of 6 fixed focus lenses, and being able to switch those out in combination, you can make the focus look pretty much, you know, continuous, which is amazing. So now we've gone from a VR, which is generally a fixed focus VR, so generally, you know, a few meters away from you. Now we can have VR where if you get an object which is rendered at a close distance, we can now focus that at a close distance. So that's kind of transformational. So that's Facebook. That's not our company, but it's definitely uses our kind of technology. These are what we can do with wavelengths. So we can make light diffract at certain wavelengths and make it pass at other wavelengths. So we can make color corrected versions of those lenses. Now, this is the meaty bit, really. This is, you know, the reason for me moving to Imagine Optics. This is me, the reason why I've been in AR for 30 years plus. And basically, this is where we're trying to aim for. And so, you know, I've included, you know, one of my products. So I was at Microsoft for 9 years. So I lived through HoloLens 1 and 2. We've obviously experienced Magic Leap. Now, these are some of the other examples of where people are trying to get to. So really trying to get to spectacle-like form factors. So Microsoft HoloLens clearly wasn't a you know, a spectacle form factor, and I'll explain why. So all those devices on the left-hand side employ surface relief grating waveguide displays. And unfortunately, they all suffer the same problems with artifacts. But nevertheless, we're pushed down that waveguide display form factor because everyone wants to go for spectacle form factors. But this is where we're at with AR today. HoloLens, I'm not sure about Magic Leap, but HoloLens is over 500 grams. And if you're going to put something on your ears and on your nose, it has to be less than 100 grams. And so we're a long way away from that. Now, you know, joining Microsoft in 2011, I was at the end of a kind of a trade study that they had. And basically, they had like this Christmas tree of technology pieces that they wanted to put on the platform. And it became very apparent very quickly that in order to support all those pieces, HoloLens had to be really a head mount, not spectacle-like. And so what we're trying to do is to move from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. Now, so in terms of the display, you know, we are working on waveguides together, but also things like display engines need to be the size of a sugar cube, and we're certainly not there yet. And on HoloLens in particular, to support all the functionality that Matthew talked about earlier on, it would be great if we can get rid of that technology, but we're still stuck with that technology. So on HoloLens, for instance, we have 8 different sensors. We have 4 head trackers, we have a depth sensor, we have a couple of eye trackers. And so all that, you know, adds up. So each of the sensors have a lens, each of the sensors has electronics, and mechanics, and all of those add up to be something pretty big. And so what we're trying to come up with really is a means of getting around that. And some of the things that we suffer with in HoloLens and all diffractive waveguides is see-through rainbows. And so with our technology, we think we can get rid of that. And all of the technology, just about every single AR system out there, if you look at them, they all project light in the forward direction. And so these are all the diffractive waveguides. Even the reflective waveguide by Loomis projects a little bit of light in the forward direction. What we found with our technology is we can get rid of that. Now, I think I'm running out of time here, but some of the ways of getting this mass down is in the optics. So this bird bath has probably been around for, I don't know, 40 years or so. But in a sugar cube form factor, you can get there because you can fold these optics around. Now in sensors, we've got a couple of ways of improving sensors. One of them is to switch out the IR sensor from a CMOS sensor. So just about every CMOS sensor out there would sense up to infrared light. So something like 1.1 micron in wavelength. Now, just about every CMOS camera out there, so all your cell phone cameras out there have got an IR blocking filter on it. Now, instead of that, what we can do is we can switch that out with our technology. So what we can have is a visible camera and an IR camera integrated into one. The other way of doing that is to actually scan the field of view of that sensor or the IR emitter around in time domain. So what we can have is a single sensor with a certain resolution, a certain angular resolution, and we can switch it in time. So if you're scanning for, tracking the world or capturing the world, you can scan that one frame at a time in angle. And I think I'll give this my last slide. As I said, this is a roll-to-roll, and in our factory, what we have now is a fully robotic sheet-to-sheet machine, and that sheet-to-sheet machine is able to produce about 325 millimeters square, and multiple hundreds, probably thousands a day, I think. And the roll-to-roll, that can do over 1 kilometer of coatings in one day. So we've got a 600 millimeter wide machine, and it can do about 1.25 kilometer sheet material in one day. So you can imagine that the scalability and also cost of these coatings can go ramping down in production. And I think I'm going to leave that here. So I'm Steve Robbins, and if you want to ask any more questions, you can reach out to me or go onto our website. And yeah, actually our website, which is fallen off that slide, is imagineoptics.com. Okay.
Thank you, Steve. It was great having you, and it's always important to hear about the hardware powering the consumer technology that hopefully we'll all be seeing in the near future. I have one question from Jonathan Lee Design, and we only have time for one, but excited to ask you this. So how do you cut the sheet into the shape that is desired? Use a die cut laser or another form of technology?
Yeah, you can use several ways. I mean, laser technology has now come on, so you can cut them out if they're in glass. We have a laser dicing machine for plastic. So, but yeah.
Awesome. Cool, Steve. We're out of time, but feel free to stick around after.
Yep, great. Thanks.
It was great to have you. Thank you. Cool. And then last but not least, I'm excited to have Eric Johnson here. He's the VP of Business Development at Mojo Vision. Eric's been involved in the industry since the launch of Google Glass in 2013, where he developed Glass at Work, one of the first significant initiatives leveraging augmented reality and the enterprise. Eric has led multiple AR businesses to successful acquisitions, where he was the VP of Business Development for 6D AI, which was acquired by Niantic, and also Stream, acquired by Frontdoor. Eric is now at Mojo Vision, building the world's first augmented reality smart contact lens. Under Eric's leadership, Mojo Vision is now one of the leading companies in the AR space. Eric, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Andy and Barry, for the invite. And Good to see my old pal. That's based on the amount of time we've known each other, Matthew, not age there. Good to reconnect with you. And then Steve and Dominic, nice to meet you guys and to present side by side with you. I think you'll see a lot of similar themes on topics that I'll discuss, especially with Steve's presentation around some of the challenges that we've faced with head-worn AR as it stands today. The opportunities, of course, but some of the challenges. I think Andy covered all the background there for me. I've been doing augmented reality stuff for about 10 years. You know, nothing like what Steve's been doing, but I've been around for a little while here. And mainly what I've focused on is go to market, getting new AR technologies to market, finding first customers and partners, and zeroing in on the right use cases. And that's what I'm doing here at Mojo Vision, is figuring out who are we going to design for, who's going to buy it first, and why. So I'll kind of end with that as I go through about 10 to 15 minutes here. The thing that I just like to highlight here, you know, I won't tell you about all our patents, but we've got a lot of funding. We're fortunate enough to have some founders, including our CEO, Drew Perkins, who's been in the Valley for 40 plus years, run a few IPOs, a number of acquisitions, and he's got some great contacts and experience, and not only helping us zero in on the right tech and the way to build the company, but also how to fund it. So that's part of what's allowing us to do some really great things. And these investors are some that he's worked with in the past, and others that we've gotten to know. But these are some of the big names that you see in Silicon Valley, like Coastal Ventures and NEA, Gradient at Google, et cetera. You know, I don't have to tell this crowd, you know, even less than the normal crowd. I think we've seen this, right? We've seen the excitement around the possibilities, whether it's Hollywood or some of our other vendors and technology companies out there painting a future as far as what's possible. At the end of the day, it's you know, it's about merging physical and digital. I think someone asked that question of Matthew, when's that going to happen? You know, Elon Musk believes it's already happened. If you've ever heard him talk about whether we live in a virtual world already or not. But in any case, that's the goal, right? So as it stands, you know, many of us carry around these devices, or the devices that I'm looking at here, and we operate in our digital world in 2D, and then our physical world, our real world in 3D. And these are two separate worlds. We're by nature 3D beings. We operate in 3 dimensions. That's why we have 2 eyes. And if you think about how we force ourselves to interact in 2D, it's really, you know, in some cases, we're still in the Stone Ages with technology. I think that's part of why living on Zoom all day long is so tiring for us, because it's we have to apply filters and kind of reduce down our senses in terms of how we interact with the digital world. So that's the future as it's been painted, and here's the future that we've been given today. Not to discount the great work that's gone into these products, especially my friend Steve, who went before me with HoloLens, which is an amazing product, and I'm sure a lot of you saw the headlines on the nice deal they did with the Army recently. But the products aren't where we want them to be. I think that's what creates the opportunity for us all here in terms of what can we do to make this better? What can we do to continue to progress this space? One of the things that I've personally noticed with heads-up displays is that there are a couple of things that are kind of panacea that people want. You know, they want those really light headsets. They want a bigger field of view, and they want to get it at consumer prices. And those have been pretty hard to achieve until now. One of the reasons that we believe that's the case, well, let me come back to that in a second. Now, I do want to acknowledge all the great work that's been done and how far we have come. If you think about, you know, the iPhone itself, what is it? Not even 10 years old, right? Was it, or a bit over 10 years old, sorry. And you think about the fact that there are billions of people using these devices now, and every single one of them's got the ability to do things in AR. My kids, I have 2 teenage daughters, and they're doing things in AR every day. They don't call it augmented reality, and that's a good thing. You know, when we drop the term, that means we're succeeding. But I think they probably interact the most in AR with games and social experiences. Snaps I think one of the underrated companies in augmented reality. They have a great team down there, and people are operating in augmented reality all day long in Snap. Of course, Pokemon Go. You know, I'm surprised it's gone this long in an AR conversation here in this meeting without someone mentioning Pokemon Go. But and then shopping, you know, IKEA. I think Andy showed the latest IKEA piece. They've been doing their part to push it forward. Google Glass, of course, down there on the lower right, the team that I worked on, you know, it still has a soft spot in my heart. We made some mistakes on that team, as any company does, any technology group, but we pushed it forward. I firmly believe. Up in the upper left, you know, input mechanisms and how do you interact with AR and VR and computing in general. I think it was either Andy or Matthew that talked about Facebook Reality Labs, that talked about some of the things they're doing with input. And I'm going to talk about how we're trying to help with input here in a second. Regardless of all that, you know, is there a different way? Is there a better way? And I think one of the challenges with heads-up display is, you know, people want bigger fields of view. They want brighter screens. They want the white light, but they want smaller devices. The challenge is, as we get these bigger field of views and we get more light, we need more power. We need bigger batteries, and the heads-up and the displays or the head-mounted units have become bigger instead of smaller. You know, the thing that we all want is something like this that I'm wearing, or even smaller, but we've kind of been in this holding pattern where we want to pack more tech into it, and it becomes larger instead of smaller. So the approach we're taking is, well, let's get that light and that projector right up as close to the eye as we can, so that we lose as little light as possible. And then what that allows us to do is use orders of magnitude less power, less light, less power, and to be able to fit all that technology in a contact lens. You know, our vision isn't necessarily that dissimilar from what you see from a lot of the glasses makers. It's to be able to connect you with the information that you want without interfering with the ability to connect with people around you. But we're doing it in a different way. And I think the nuanced differences are what really allow us to deliver on that vision that we call invisible computing. So let me talk about some of the differences in invisible computing. So first of all, you want to look like yourself. And I think that's back when I worked on glass, you know, we spent some time with Luxottica over in Italy. And I kind of had to laugh a little bit when I saw Facebook talking about it recently, just to myself, just knowing the challenges that they're going to go through. The tech industry and the fashion industry speak very different languages. But the root of that is that people don't want to change how they look when they're using technology. And so our solution to that is, let's make it as transparent as possible. And we do that with a contact lens, to the point in which you can't even see that the person's wearing the technology. Extreme mobility. If you look at any AR headset, is my camera view blocking my slides, by the way, Andy? Here, I'll just minimize that. Extreme mobility. So this is one of the things I think that's been holding AR back as well, is there are quite a few limits as to when you can wear headsets. You know, whether I'm on an oil rig or I'm riding my bike, I want to be able to not only look like myself, but I want to be able to move through the world and operate, move my head around, not have something hot and warm warming up my head, that's sitting on my head, that's heavy. I want to be able to have peripheral view to see the world. I want to be able to have my hands truly free. You know, you hear a lot of AR companies talking about hands-free, but if you look at any one of them, they all require you to use your hands to interact with the AR device. Something different that we do, because we actually sit on the eye, we've got an order of magnitude more accuracy with eye tracking than any of the devices you see out there today. And what that allows us to do, among other things, is to be able to use the eye as a mouse, as a pointer, to interact as an input mechanism, to interact with the computing, thereby truly delivering on the hands-free experience, so that then I can ride a bike. And if I want to switch the display that I'm looking at while I'm riding, or if I want to stop or pause, or I want to play music, I can do all those things without taking my hands off the handlebars. Discrete interface, you know, it's related to being invisible, but it's being able to interact without having to put, in this case, my briefcase down as I'm walking across the street, or to look down at my phone as I'm walking down the street, to be able to do all that, or while I'm communicating and talking to somebody, to the need to look down at my watch, for example. Even with a watch, I'm sure you've all noticed that, those of you that are wearing smart watches, when you look down at your watch in the middle of a conversation, it's a cue to the other person that you've got to go somewhere or you need to wrap up the conversation. So the idea is to minimize that. And then lastly, related, going back to the eye tracking, there's a lot of interesting things we can do knowing where your eyes are moving. As your eyes move across to a specific location, you can make some assumptions as to where that end destination is for your eyes, and be able to get assistance and help to people, in some cases before they even ask for it. So we pack a lot in this lens. We've got 14,000 PPI display, a micro LED display. So the human eye is 28,000 pixels per inch, or about half the resolution of the human eye. Our goal is to match the resolution of the human eye such that we can get as much resolution into the eye as it can take. We've got batteries on the lens, so the lens powers itself. We have, of course, a radio to communicate to external devices that allow communication with the outside world. We've got a low resolution image sensor in the lens. The primary purpose for that, and it goes to the first target audience or the first set of people that'll buy the lens, is it enables a set of features for low vision wearers. So for example, enabling us to highlight dangerous items in their environment as they walk or move around their home, to be able to highlight and provide edge detection and awareness for dangerous objects in their environment. Let's see, what else do we have in here? We have an IMU, so we have an accelerometer, magnetometer, and gyro in the lens, and that's what enables us to do the accurate eye tracking. The lens is independent of anything else. There are no glasses or frames required to wear. The lens works on its own and sits on a contact lens vehicle called a scleral lens that's been around for decades. We chose the scleral lens because of its comfort and its stability on the eye to keep the display stable. One other thing I want to highlight on this slide is, because we're projecting light directly into the center of the eye and we're moving our display with the eye, this allows us to provide an effective unlimited field of view. So this is another thing that's really different about what we're doing, and it's leveraging the different approach of sitting on the eye. I talked earlier about people wanting larger fields of view, and we're able to deliver on that. We don't light up the whole display all at the same time. And this is similar to how your eye works. If each of you out there kind of look at the display or look at your screen that you're watching my presentation on, and don't move your eyes, but be aware of the space around that, that's all actually low resolution imagery that your eye is delivering. Your brain tricks you into thinking that's high resolution because you've previously scanned it and your brain remembers it. So our display works the same way. Wherever your eye moves, we're able to display light, and then your brain remembers what it's seen to provide the illusion of unlimited field of view. And you can only do that if you're moving with the eye. And the only way to move with the eye is if you're sitting on the eye. So I mentioned earlier, we're going to start with visually impaired, and that's part of the FDA regulatory process that we're moving through now. We're in the breakthrough devices program with the FDA that allows us to do rapid iteration around our product. And we're focused now on helping people that are visually impaired. And then quickly after that, we plan to move into the sports and wellness space. And that's really a preview. We think there's a ton of value we can provide in that space. And it's really a preview of moving into broader consumer adoption. The focus across all three of these segments is performance, and it's performance in the moment. If you think about, for example, in sports, for those of you that cycle or run or do yoga or even meditate, most of the vast majority of the technology that you're going to use in those is tech that you use before and after. You know, when I'm running, over the years, I've tried to tap on my iPod on my arm to change the song or look at my watch. And it really just, none of those factors really work. And we're bullish on what we can do with the lens to get you information during an activity to help you perform in the moment. So that'll be an area that you'll see us zero in on. We've been around 5 years, so we've probably put more behind us than we need to do in front of us to get our lens out and purchasable by mass market consumers. We're on track to achieve a lot this year with eye tracking, putting battery in the lens, wireless data, getting our micro LED nailed down, and then moving quickly into what will happen is you'll use cosmetics and we'll match the color of your iris to cover the electronics such that people won't be able to see, other people around you won't be able to see that you're wearing the lens. And on that, I'll wrap it up. With our vision for invisible computing with an eyes up future, and we're excited about where this all goes. We're excited to stay engaged with the market, and you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Again, my name is Eric Johnson, and thank you so much for listening and for being here. I look forward to taking a few questions.
Thank you, Eric. Such a pleasure to have you here, and awesome presentation. The first question we have from Malik Kahouk is, transitioning AR from a consumer platform to a medical device limits your speed of iterating and evolving. Is this a real obstacle, or maybe an advantage by raising the bar for fast followers?
Great question. You know, that's our single biggest challenge. That's the hard thing about putting this on a contact lens. A contact lens is a medical device by nature. And that's why it's regulated by the FDA in the US and equivalent agencies around the world. And it certainly causes us to move more deliberately and work in closer partnership with the government. We think that the opportunity, if we can break through this process, this regulatory process, is so big for everybody. It's such a big opportunity for what you can do with the product. It's a great business opportunity for us, and it's going to be, you know, hopefully we can pave the way for others to follow through behind us and move a bit quicker through this FDA process. But yeah, we acknowledge that it's a challenge, and you know, we'll start like every company does. People forget the first year of the iPhone, you know, there were tens of thousands sold. You know, I won't talk through our volume, our first year, our planned volume, but we're going to start in modest ways, just like technology does, and then we'll scale it accordingly.
Thank you, Eric. A question from Evan Doggo. Is there a concern of harming the eye, whether is losing contact, battery exploding, hardware sticking out, etc.?
So it's a biosafe battery. Just to hit on that point first. Secondly, make no mistake, the FDA exists for this sole purpose of making sure that what we're doing is safe. We're by no means holding ourselves back to only what the FDA requires. We are safety is #1 priority as we build this out. We're already wearing the lenses, a number of us inside the building. The lenses work today, we're testing them ourselves, and there's a whole series and set of phases to go through the appropriate testing to make sure it's safe. But yeah, that's priority #1.
That's awesome. And question from Jonathan Lee. It does not seem that current application has sensor. So how does the device detect the environment and alert the people who aren't able to see?
How does the device alert? So we have an image sensor in the contact lens, but that doesn't seem like that's the question that he's asking. How can we let others know that we're wearing the device? Is that what he's asking, Andy? Can you repeat the last part of the question?
Yeah, sure. So it's, how does the device detect the environment and alert the people who aren't able to see? So perhaps the folks that aren't wearing the lenses.
I don't know that we've focused on that so much for now. perhaps he's talking about alerting the person wearing the lens of objects in the environment that have low vision. So one example of that is being able to, so using the image sensor to collect nearby objects or obstacles that are in my environment. Like I'm sitting in a room with a table and some chairs and a little coffee table over here. So if I was walking through this space, because there's a low res image sensor, I can then detect those objects, and then using the display and the lens, highlight and put an edge, a bright edge around the outside of those objects that even a person with low vision can still sense and see. Hopefully that answered the question, but if not, maybe we can follow on afterwards.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jonathan, for the question. Brian has more a question on the business side. So Jonathan wrote, thank you. So I think we answered his question well. So thank you, Eric. Brian's question is more on the business front, but has the 2021 goal been met yet, or is it close to being met?
It's all within sight. No pun intended for this year. Yeah.
Okay. Hope that answered your question, Brian. So it looks like that's it for the questions for you, Eric. But I appreciate it.
Okay. Great. Good questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. If you have any more questions, feel free to post them in the chat. I invited Avraham, an acquaintance of mine who's working on some really interesting Tesla augmented reality concepts, and invited him to join. It was a bit last minute, so not on the agenda, but Avraham's here on the chat. He's there he is. He spent some time working at Meta, and now he's living in Australia, working in AR for a few different businesses. So feel free, Avraham, to share your screen and show some of the cool projects you're working on.
Sure, thanks for that. First of all, Eric, that was a really cool talk. Lovely to hear all of it. I just dipped into Mexico, so I'm not in Australia at the moment. So the time zones are a bit easier. So I'll give a little bit about myself and show you guys some very quick stuff. This was last minute. I'll try keep it under 5 minutes. So yeah, I started off as a lead designer in Meta. There we were conceptualizing back in those days the full this complete new paradigm of like what is design, how does this even look, how do people work with it. Obviously once you change paradigms, everything's different, right? Moving from desktop to mobile, moving to AR, everything's completely different. Since then I've been helping companies kind of design and get into this new paradigm. I've worked on a couple of different products, augmented sound, there's quite a few things. But one thing I noticed traveling through this and being in AR and back in those days was when I would come to new places, people didn't really know much about AR. And the people that did, this actually follows up from something that Eric said. Most people know things like Pokemon Go on one end, or they know like Hollywood, Iron Man type of things, and some of the images that Eric did show. Those are the big fantastical kind of worlds that people kind of think of, and they look at those two things and they're like, I'm not a teenager running across the street playing, my games on my little phone, and I'm not Iron Man. So AR is this gimmick. It's nothing that we're going to care about. So it was something that most people they couldn't connect to. And even nowadays, I'll speak to people and people will now know AR, but I think a lot of the general public is still very far from it. When you come into the AR circles, everyone knows and has big ideas and some really lofty dreams. We want to do all these big things, but it's the everyday person that we need to educate and we need to get to and bring these things out and get them, excited about. So a couple of years ago, I started a small concept videos called the series 2025. And the idea was back then, 2025 is like, sounds so futuristic, but we want to look at some very common day-to-day kind of scenarios. Now, I'm not going to share them today. I'm going to share some Tesla things, and probably we'll keep that to maybe one or two. But jumping into Tesla, the idea there was, and it was an extension of this. It was like, this is a car that we already have nowadays. I mean, anyone who's been in a Tesla, owned a Tesla, knows how crazy that experience is. Imagine if you could walk into a Tesla and have augmented reality on top of that, right? That would be absolutely phenomenal. You do have some cars recently, like the Audi is the most recent one that's come out with augmented reality. We can argue and say that that's not real augmented reality. It's just a heads-up display, show some information in certain areas. But at the end of the day, what it should do and what augmented reality should do in driving is make driving safer. Up until we get self-driving cars, and everything's completely safe, augmented reality actually can make driving safer. So I made some Tesla concepts of showing, and I believe that Tesla is probably the closest company that actually can bring us AR in the car. They could even technically do it tomorrow. They've got pretty much all the puzzle pieces there, and it's just about coming to that last little place. So I'm just gonna share my screen. And I probably only have time maybe to show one thing, but this was a little concept. I hope you guys can see. See my screen? Okay, great.
Yeah, that's good.
So this over here, we'll just turn it off. This idea over here is basically utilizing the car and information around it. So we're very used to in today's paradigm of screens, flat screens, and working with the computer in a very flat window. We're used to having like that in the car and everything completely separate, either on a phone or a car. Here, it's this concept specifically is looking at what if once we use augmented reality, we can suddenly now the materials, the worlds that we're able to use now completely opens up, and it's completely it's unlimited what we can use. Our canvas is now no longer some screen that's stuck inside the car that we have to go into the car to see, but rather we can now use the body of the car. We can use the materials, we can use the textures where it is, we can use the hose that's coming in. And all this can help show information and really bring out those things that before today would require an app or something in your pocket, things like that. I'm not sure how much more time I have, but just to wrap up these concepts is, it's very easy to showcase big, grand ideas. And I think for the general public, we need to be showing things that are very common, day to day, things that someone can look at and go, you know what, I could have used that today. That could have really helped me out. And I think these very simple, common things are going to be those game changers. There are some more things over here that I'd love to speak about it, but said under 5 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up. And always happy to hear from you guys, and I can take questions, but if not, welcome to message me, and happy to keep that conversation going.
Thanks, Avram. And if you want to join the next meetup as well, if you're in New York or in the same time zone, let me know if you want to share some more of the projects. Do you mind answering a question or two?
Sure.
Cool. So question from Brian Chung. Should AR designers learn advanced 3D modeling techniques such as texturing, lighting, and animation?
Yeah, short answer, 100%.
There you go. 100%, Brian. And another follow-up question: should designers learn video effects like the example you just showed?
So, these kind of things are very helpful to show ideas. So if you're in an area where you're trying to get an idea out there, or you're in a company and you're trying to get something, you're trying to get the company to go in a certain direction, you're trying to convince people, it's a super good skill to learn. It's like the new sketch, it's the new ways to do mock-up. You want to be able to showcase ideas in the 3D world, and these kind of things are kind of where you're able to showcase all these ideas that otherwise would be very hard to explain, as people don't really understand. Like was said before, augmented reality is the 3D world, right? Human beings this is natural to us, right? The 3D world is natural, but most of us have grown up in a world where we've had to learn, a 2D flat window. And so when you explain it to someone, it's supposed to be very simple, and it is actually at the end. But sometimes people have to go through the process of they're translating in their head of, to a 2D app, and then coming back to the 3D world. So it's important, and that's where it is.
Thanks, Avram, and really awesome seeing your projects. So
Cheers.
thank you. From Devin, he just wants to know what's the best way to contact you, which social media or blog?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
Connect with me on LinkedIn. I can put I'll put my link my LinkedIn.
All right, that sounds great. Sweet. Thanks for joining.
Cheers.
Awesome. So once Avram posts that up, we will we'll wrap up. But appreciate everyone joining tonight. It was really a nice meetup. And I'm going to post Avram's LinkedIn now, actually. Have it as a direct message. I got it. Cool. So feel free to connect with all the speakers. I'm sure they'd be happy to hear from you. And that's a wrap. That is New York Augmented Reality tonight. And I wish everyone a good evening, and I'll see you next month. Thank you.